Volumes were well down on the local share market today. Earlier I spoke to Charlie Aitken from Southern Cross Equities. So Charlie Aitken, a more settled day on the local market. What was driving it?
Well, it was a slightly more optimistic and calmer start to the week after the mayhem of last week, Tiki. Look, I suppose the Nikkei market not being open helped, but also news on the nuclear reactor in Japan getting a little bit better, or at least no worse, definitely helped sentiment in the region and Australia. And look, I just think that there's a little bit of bargain hunting around today as the world hasn't quite ended.
We've also had news out of China, which actually came through on Friday, but there's to be another tightening of monetary policy. Has there been any fallout here?
Well, no, the market accepted that pretty well. BHP shares underperformed today. I suppose they're the biggest China exposure, and there was some switching to the banks. I think this move by the People's Bank was quite expected. I think you can see it in the Aussie dollar. If the market was panicking about China, the Aussie dollar would have had a bad day, but it was back above parity today and trading quite strongly. So the market actually took that in its stride. Really, Japan's been the main focus, and it probably will continue to be for a little while longer.
And local banks had a reasonable day today. Why was that?
Well, the banks, I think it was a little bit on the back of US banks. The Federal Reserve is allowing US banks to pay dividends again. That should help sentiment towards bank stocks globally. Plus, there's a few local investors looking at the Australian banks on 10 times earnings, 6% yields, thinking it's pretty good value ahead of a reporting season in May. And there's just been a bit of bargain hunting in the bank sector.
OK, and still in the finance sector, Treasurer Wayne Swan today has put down any speculation that the decision on the ASX and Singapore exchange is as good as done. How did the market respond to that?
Well, no offence to the Treasurer, but they don't believe him. I mean, ASX shares are now lower than the day before the bid was announced by the Singapore exchange. That's quite amazing. And 22% below the peak of what they traded during the bid. I think the share market is of the view that this takeover of the ASX is no chance of happening, and I believe that the share market's view is that the Treasurer is just going through the motions. So I think that it won't go ahead, and I think the price of the ASX shares is telling you that.
You actually think the deal won't go ahead?
I don't think it'll go ahead in any form. I think it'll get blocked by the Foreign Investment Review Board, and I think the share price trading miles below the offer price and below the day when it was first announced is telling you that.
And finally, BC Iron is not happy with being left at the altar, it seems.
Well, left at the altar might be an understatement here, Tiki. I think the wedding was on, the car had turned up, the father-in-law was there, and suddenly the bid wasn't. So, they had a bid on the table from a group called Region Pacific at $3.30. That evaporated, just disappeared last Thursday. They've gone to the Takeovers Tribunal, and probably quite rightly so, actually, to have this looked into, the terms of Region Pacific pulling their bid. And on the back of that news, BC Iron shares up a little bit, but way below where they were last week.
Charlie Aitken, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Tiki.